I think intuition is the beginning of the exploration, not the end. So people who rely on intuition for major decision making are probably making a cognitive mistake. People who don't follow their intuition or hunches at all and explore them and create tests that can then be validated or invalidated quickly are discounting one of the most amazing things that we have at our disposal, which is this brain that pattern matches whether we want it to or not, and gives us these crazy ideas that frankly need to be tested.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow? Today we're going to talk about growing your company. Specifically, how do you use your values? What are the things that you actually must do as a leader when you want to embrace the values of the company? Why do I think values are so important? A lot of the interviews right here together about values is because they are important. Because when you have a core set of guidelines for your team to understand how to make decisions when you're not in the room, and that they know how to operate, they know how to move forward, what's expected of them, then they feel the confidence to make those decisions. They know they're not going to get fired because they know that they're playing within the boundaries of this, because you want them to be empowered to make those decisions. Today, we're actually going to be talking about decision making based on data-driven decisions. And that's a value from a company out there called Cience Technologies. I'm here with the founder, CEO. His name is John Girard. And John and I talk about, what is data-driven decisions? Why you must go include your instincts and include data, and then what you do inside the one-on-one conversations or team conversations that allow you to truly see your values in action. Well, today we're going to talk about that, and we're going to go really deep into it. Thanks for tuning in here to Grow Think Tank. Really excited about sharing this with you. And before you run, I have done so many interviews over the last few weeks. I have such an exciting time to share with you that those interviews have been organized into the 12 core principles of fast growth companies. So all you have to do to get that is go to genehammett.com/worksheet. So you can get the 12 principles, and I've been able to go in there and find which episodes will align to each individual episode. When you subscribe to Grow Think Tank, you will find exactly what you need so that you can move forward. And many of them haven't been published yet, depending on when you're hearing this, but you can tune in to the date that means the most to you. Now here's the interview with John. Hi, John. How are you?
Great, Gene. How you doing?
I am fantastic. Love to have you here on the podcast. Love to tune in the audience a little bit about the company. So tell us about Cience Technologies.
Yeah, happy to. So Cience is a company that helps B2B businesses build the top of their sales funnel. So we're an outbound prospecting as a service business, which means basically we help figure out who your best clients are. And based on that, create a profile that we then go research, and we find lots more of those people to start sales conversations with. So we're not actually selling your product for you. What we're doing is setting up conversations for you so that your sales team can go out and close more business.
Well, that's a very needed business model out there. I'm sure a lot of people listening in go, you're going to just hand us some qualified leads that are kind of teed up for us?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I've been involved in a lot of bleeding edge technology companies over the years where you're trying to sort of triangulate on a market need that might emerge a few years down the road and get the technology to meet right where that point is. And this one is everybody needs it and they need it right now, which is a real sort of blessing in the whole thing. So yes, what we do is we set up these conversations, set up these appointments for our clients. And it's actually funny because it is deceptively difficult to do it well. There's actually a lot more that goes into it than just picking up the phone and calling a bunch of people and saying, hey, would you be interested in meeting with this company? There's actually a science behind it. And that's part of why we have the name we have.
Well, I appreciate the perspective there. When we were talking last week about, what's really driven the growth of your company, and I'm going to rattle off a couple of numbers here. Number
Yeah.
112 on the Inc. list, over 4 million now, I would imagine.
Yeah, more than double that actually at this
Okay.
point.
And you've got hundreds of employees. How many do you know? How many you
So
have
yeah,
about?
529 as of 10 minutes ago.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you've had to pay attention to culture and this thing called core values. You felt like it was a really important piece to building a team together. So why are core values important?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I happen to know core values are important because I didn't realize how important they were at an earlier stage in my career, and it bit me. And really, the way I think about it is when you're in a rapidly growing business in a complex space, there's no way to create a playbook for every possible scenario or decision that you or your employees have to make. You can't say, okay, if a customer says this thing and it's a Tuesday, and here are the issues they're facing. Okay, what is exactly the right answer? So instead, values provide a really incredible framework for helping to drive the decisions that a business makes, and to help empower every single person in the organization to sort of hold up their decision making against the same framework, the same thought process, and then go forward from there. I would much rather somebody make a decision quickly and thoughtfully based on the values than get stuck every time they have to make an important decision and run it all the way up the chain and leave me with a pile of decisions, a mile high to try to make every day.
One of the biggest factors in fast growth companies, and I talk about this on stages all the time, is founders and leadership team is there to inspire people to take ownership of the work.
100%.
And the values provide some guardrails around how you will make decisions.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. It's a heuristic, right? It's a pattern or a you can think of it as a filter, a template that you kind of hold up and say, okay, is this thing I'm about to do, does it match the criteria that I've laid out here? And frankly, that I've already decided I'm committed to, right? I don't have to figure out that stuff, at this point in the process, because a long time ago, a few months ago or a year ago or 2 years ago, I already decided that these are the important criteria that I'm going to use and I'm going to apply to every decision.
I know in our company, one of the core values is elevate the experience. When we're sending out emails, responding to people, it's very easy to say, we'd like to interview your CEO.
Yep.
But we take a step further to go, we'd like to interview John for the podcast. And that's one way that my team understands, and we're all aligned together. It's like every little step matters.
Absolutely.
When you think about the values for your company, what you've been talking about is something that a lot of people are familiar with, but operationalizing the values, like truly living by them day in and day out. I have a lot of interviews on here. The reason I wanted to have you on, John, is because one of your values is around data-driven decision making. So where did that come from?
Well, it's a little bit buzzy to actually use that term, and we realized that. But rather than kind of leaning away from that, we decided to kind of lean in and fully embrace it. And where it came from was actually the group the core group that had formed here at Cience was extraordinarily analytical and really valued looking at the numbers and understanding the way that everything was working from a sort of a number sense, and actually was extraordinarily good at setting aside ego and even intuition, and just saying, wow, the numbers say that I'm totally wrong and I'm good with that. And as I think is the case with most exercises in figuring out company values, it was really an act of discovery rather than engineering. So we were looking for the core ideas and themes and values that were already there with this core group of people, rather than trying to sort of pluck something out of thin air and say, let's now all be like this, because that never worked. So it started there. It started with a kernel of a core group of people who really were dedicated to this kind of analytical mindset and way of thinking. And then we took that a little bit further and recognized that in our space in particular, there's a real lack of data-driven decision-making. And there's a real black magic kind of an aspect to a lot of the firms that are doing appointment setting, lead gen, starting sales conversations. And we wanted to avoid that completely. what we wanted to say is like, look, there's real math behind all this. We can actually paint the picture of a funnel using real numbers and show you exactly what's happening, and show you the ways in which a dollar invested in a service like this could potentially turn into $3, and not have there be any hand waving or any black box that you can't actually look into and see. And so once we kind of realized that there was already this analytical mindset, and this was a space where people had sort of shied away from being terribly analytical, it was a perfect opportunity to make it part of the institution and say, like, this is really who we are.
Now, I know a lot of people out there have gotten to where they are in their companies by trusting their gut. And how does that play with the data-driven decisions that you expect?
Sure.
Because this is not just you, this is the entire team. You have 500 people moving together, making data-based decisions. But how does it work with instincts?
Very good question. So I am a huge believer in gut and intuition, believe it or not. Like, that may sound contrary to what I've spelled out so far, but here's what I think. I think intuition is the beginning of the exploration, not the end. So people who rely on intuition for major decision making are probably making a cognitive mistake. People who don't follow their intuition or hunches at all and explore them and create tests that can then be validated or invalidated quickly are discounting one of the most amazing things that we have at our disposal, which is this brain that pattern matches whether we want it to or not, and gives us these crazy ideas that frankly need to be tested. So we think of intuition as critical to the process of eventually executing data-driven decision making. It's where the exploration starts, and that ends up being really, really important in this space in particular, where what worked for us 9 months ago might not actually work today. So we have to constantly be evolving and testing and thinking of new ideas and exploring intuitions that may seem sort of contrary to conventional belief, and then testing them and seeing if the data says, yeah, this will work, or no, it won't. And frankly, either one of those is a good answer.
Now, hold on for a second. John just talked about the value of intuition inside the decision-making process. And I agree with this. We want to encourage our employees to understand and trust their thinking, but back it up with data. So once you have the data, they want to be able to back it up. I've always said too that you want to encourage your employees to create tests. If they have an idea about what's going forward, how could they create a small test that doesn't, we're not going to lose too much money, but we can get some insight about moving forward. Will this work? And many times those tests don't cost any money, but they get to think about what will the outcome be and how can we measure it so that we really can learn from this opportunity. Now back to the interview with John. Now I want to go into, maybe my mind has kind of got this question involved where someone walks in and there's a decision that needs to be made and they're talking about it with you as a leader, and you're going to ask them a question, and I don't want to put the words in your mouth, but you're like, what's the data behind this question? What do you ask over and over and over?
Well, I always ask, what is the data? What do we know right now? And when I say what do we know, what I'm hinting at is what do the numbers currently show us. Now, one thing I'll say, sort of hasten to add here, is that just because we say we're data-driven doesn't mean that we're immune from sort of the usual constraints of decision-making in a fast-moving business, which is to say we never have 100% of the information when we make important decisions. And that's just sort of part of the deal. So we have to be comfortable making decisions with less than 100% of the information, and sometimes a lot less. But when somebody says, hey, this is the thing that we want to do, I'm very likely to say, well, have we tested it? Right. So, and when I say that, what I mean is, we've got more than 200 clients right now. We run most of our own tests on ourselves. So we have a bunch of house accounts that we're using for Cience. And what I really mean is, have we tried this out at very small scale to see if there is a reason to do it at larger scale? And just about everybody who's approached me with anything at this point has heard me say some version of that. So most of the time, they've actually done the legwork beforehand, or at least come prepared to say, well, no, but here's the test, and we need some help figuring out these aspects of it.
I'm fascinated by this because I'll admit I am a numbers person.
Yeah.
I studied engineering in college.
Yep.
And I heard someone made the joke the other day, but Georgia Tech gave me an engineering degree if I promised not to use it.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Because I never used it. I went into consulting.
Yeah.
But this has become a core of the way everyone works. Like when someone comes to you and hasn't done the research or hasn't brought you the data, what is your response behind that, John?
Well, so my usual way of framing this, and I talk to clients this way, and I talk to employees too, is look, there are numbers that are discoverable behind all of this, whether you know them or not. They're there operating in the background and doing what they do without really much care about whether you explore them or don't explore them, right? So it's actually happening, and you can pretend that it's not and go on with your day and make decisions based on gut or something else, or you can actually uncover them and take a look and see what's really there. So my response is usually, well, let's unwind this or unweave this a little bit, and it's a different mindset that requires a different way of thinking, and it's if somebody doesn't have a math or engineering background, or it's actually even got some design thinking kind of baked into it, and if you haven't been exposed to that before, it can be easy to get stuck. Like, well, I was able to sort of reduce it to this level, but I couldn't get it any further down, and I can't figure out how to make it work, and that's fine. That is an opportunity for us all to learn something, and to say like, well, let's take this down another level, another notch or two, and see if we can discover something, explore something together.
Now, I have to ask you, in the aspects of running a business through core values and operationalizing them the way you have you made any mistakes along this journey?
Oh, of course. I mean, dozens and dozens and dozens. The biggest mistake that I made in the beginning was failing to learn from other people's mistakes, which is to say, I actually thought, this is sort of the hubris of youth, I guess, but like, I sort of thought, look, I'm different. I'm going to figure this out my own way. I'm going to do it my own way. And so I made all the usual mistakes when I could have actually learned patterns, from other folks who'd been there before, and especially people who'd made the same mistakes and been vulnerable enough to write about it or talk about it. So I would say that was the single biggest mistake I made, was thinking at a very early stage as an entrepreneur, like, gosh, maybe these rules don't apply to me. And look, I think that was an important phase of my professional development that I had to experience in order to A, have the ambition to go out and do it, and B, get beat up a little bit and realize maybe I should pay attention to others and get some mentorship and some coaching and learn from my board and that kind of thing. So it had to happen, and I'm glad it did. This is a much easier way to live, and I sleep a lot more soundly these days.
1 second here. John just talked about failing to learn from others. Now, I had a question for you. Are you really tuning in to what others around you are doing inside your industry and even outside your industry? Do you have a coach or someone that can give you that outside perspective? One of the things I see, and I think is very valuable with my clients, is that I've talked to so many executives. I've talked to so many founders like you, and so I've seen a lot of these issues firsthand. A lot of them have been my clients, some of them have been interviews, but really, I can help you tune into that very quickly. Now, if you have your own network of people, are you listening to those people? Now, back to the interview. I want to wrap this up with a big question here, and I don't know where this will go, but what is one defining moment that you can share with us that changed the way you think about your own leadership?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So what I would actually point to is a decision actually that came out of our core values. We've been talking a lot about data-driven decision making. That's sort of the very kind of analytical side of the brain. One of our other core values is respect, and that's respect for one another, respect for the client. It's also the client's respect for us and for our employees. And what we want with that is to sort of balance this idea of being analytical and being thoughtful about the numbers and extraordinarily direct about what we're finding from a numbers perspective. But we want to balance that with the humanity side of what we're doing. Like one of the things that I say over and over that I know to be true is that I've never seen a B2B sale happen without first two humans having a human conversation. This is not automated away by AI. It's about these sort of basic human interactions still to this day, and it's likely to be for a while. And respect is really kind of a cornerstone of that, especially given the fact that we're global. We operate in 4 different countries and have folks from all different cultural backgrounds. So how do we establish that, and how do we make that work? Now, in a lot of regards, the making sure that we are respectful of clients is common to most businesses that have service elements in them. If somebody goes really off the rails and is very disrespectful towards a client, there's a hard conversation, but an easy decision usually in terms of parting ways with that employee. My one of the most experiences I've had in leadership that really helped me to understand how important it is to live values is when we had a situation about a year ago with a client that was sort of borderline abusive with our team. And it was a really interesting experience because we're extraordinarily professional. We really do things in, like I said, in a data-driven way, and we try to provide as much information and insight as we possibly can. And we deliver exceptional value, which is sort of, we see in the fact that we have a lot of return customers and a lot of people with us for a very long time. This client, for whatever reason, was very disrespectful and very abusive. And ultimately, what we decided to do was to, gracefully and respectfully end the relationship with the client. And I would say it was surprising because when we were thinking about the lost revenue, when we were thinking about where else could this go, it got very, very complicated to sort of figure out what to do. And as soon as we backed up and we said, well, what are our values? And we held the decision up against those values, it was really obvious really quickly that, the purpose of having that respect value in there is that there's respect all around the table. And if it's not existing, even with the client approaching our team, that's not a fit. And it meant that it was time to move on. And so it was a great example for me of values in action. It was also a great example of how important it is to live the values with the team, because our team, they're used to battle, and they were willing to say, hey, we'll keep doing this, we'll keep pushing. But when we made that decision, it was certainly appreciated by the people involved, and there were ripple effects throughout the company in making that hard choice. So I would say that's probably my best example.
Well, John, thanks for being here on the show. I appreciate it.
You got it, Gene. Thank you. Yeah, my pleasure.
Wow, what a fantastic interview. Really love having these conversations, getting into the day-to-day, in the trenches of the decision makers that understand what moves business forward. And talking to fast growth leaders like John, I'm really excited to share these strategies with you and share some of the mindset that they've had to evolve over time. Now, if you're not picking up some clues behind this and taking notes and applying them in your business, you're missing out, because I hear back from all the time about people listening to the podcast and what they get from it. So today you've got a really solid understanding of how to put your values in action, and that's really important if you want to continue the growth of your company. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.